Easy one.
I don't know where they are. Got the whole contingent here. This is so much. Okay, guys, let's go. We're on track. It's all the kindergarten stuff, you know, and it's taking me back to school way back when. So, today, representing the Sheriff's Department, OPNET, K-9 unit, we have Chief Criminal Deputy Brian King, who has served 27 years as a law enforcement officer in Clallam County, becoming Clallam County Sheriff's Deputy in 2001. During his career, Chief King assignments have included patrol, K-9, school resource officer, training coordinator, detective, and sergeant. This is working right through all the ranks. Thank you so much for your service. Brian joined the Sheriff's Office command staff in 2015 when he was appointed by Sheriff Benedict to the position of Chief Criminal Deputy, assuming command of the department's Control Division, Investigations Division, and the Olympic Peninsula Narcotics Enforcement Team. Chief King is a 2017 graduate of the FBI National Academy and lives in Port Angeles with his wife Brenda, who is the assistant principal of secondary schools in the Philly Valley School District. This is way better than the Facebook one I had developed last night. So thank you so much.
Better get better on Facebook.
Come on up. And he's going to introduce the rest of the contingent with him. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, fellow Rotarians. It's certainly one of the highlights of my job is commanding the Olympic Peninsula Narcotic Enforcement Team, commonly known as OPNET. And it's really a privilege because we're doing a lot of good work out in the community with 4 full-time detectives. If you think of the output that these 4 full-time detectives are doing every day in our community is pretty amazing. So in 2021, we removed over $7 million worth of illicit drugs off of the streets of Jefferson County. That's a pretty staggering number with 4 guys working hard. But it's the partnerships that a task force creates when we bring everybody together, focusing on a single problem that exists in our community that really adds to our success. And so with me today is Eric Prange. He's a K-9 handler for the Department of Corrections up at Clallam Bay, and he also covers OCC and is a partner on the task force. He has a lovely dog named Ghost, which you're going to meet very soon. Okay. And so today I really want to focus more on Ghost and K-9 than OPNET, just because I can take 45 minutes of your time and talk just about OPNET. But boy, it's pretty exciting that we actually can see a K-9 demo today. And as a former K-9 handler, you know, it's near and dear to my heart. I worked 2 dogs, and we had a lot of fun. His boss is with us today, Ed Brady. He is the Chief of Intelligence and Investigations out at Clallam Bay Correction Center. We work closely with Ed. We have a lot of drugs coming into our county. Those drugs are coordinated oftentimes by offenders that are up in prison up in Clallam Bay. So they're still far reaching in how the drug networks work here on the peninsula and all over the United States. And lastly, Josh Pallas, he's a sergeant with Port Angeles Police Department. He's the day-to-day supervisor for the detective who's working on the drug task force. Josh, 2 years now?
Yeah, 2020, January 2020.
January 2020. So the partnership that exists with OPNET is we usually get a new supervisor every 3 years, and that's the rotation that comes out of the Port Angeles Police Department. And so the Sheriff's Office administers and commands the task force, and Port Angeles Police Department provides a sergeant to oversee the day-to-day operations. And then we have detectives from all of our partner agencies that include the Swim Police Department, Port Angeles Police Department. The Sheriff's Office also has a detective assigned. And then we have Jefferson County detectives as well as Port Townsend detectives. But 4 are truly dedicated every day to the investigations that are occurring on the streets. A lot of the other agencies, as needed, contribute partners into the program. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Eric Prange so we can talk about Ghost a little bit and everything that he does. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So I'll first start off talking about Ghost. So Ghost is a very famous canine. He's deaf. He might be the only deaf detection dog in the whole United States. He's been on Good Morning America. He has several videos out there. So if you do a search for deaf canine Ghost on Google, some videos of his will come up. Also, he has some on YouTube as well. So about myself, I basically grew up in the Bellevue area. A little known fact, my dad was a DEA agent, and he did a lot of work out here back in the late 70s and early 80s. I basically got into law enforcement is when I moved out here. I got a job with County Parks, Clallam County Parks. I was the park manager at Salt Creek County Park. One thing led to another. I started working with Department of Corrections, and then after several years, I got the K-9 position. How it works at the DOC, we basically look for dogs, shelter dogs. Then we train them up. The dogs we look for are dogs that typically people don't want to have as pets. For example, Ghost is deaf, so that's a mark against him. Also, he's not very cuddly. He doesn't look for affection. So when somebody's looking for a dog, they go to a shelter and they want a dog that kind of interacts with them, looks at them and wants to be petted. Well, Ghost isn't that type of dog. He doesn't even like being touched. So so he had a lot of marks against him. He was found as a puppy wandering the streets in Florida. They guessed that he was probably about 3 months old when they found him. He went to the dog pound there. He was slated to be euthanized. A rescue picked him up from the pound. It was called Swamp Haven. And so they rescued dogs, try to find him a home. Well, he sat at Swamp Haven for close to a year. Somehow they made a connection with our Humane Society in Port Angeles. And then they moved him up here. Still nobody was interested in him. And DOC has a relationship with the shelter. They called us and asked if we were interested in training him as a drug dog. So he was first trained up and went to a different handler in McNeil Island. He worked there for about 6 months, and then his handler got a promotion. And then one night, they called me. The handler said, "I got a promotion. I won't be doing the K-9 anymore. Would you like Ghost?" Because he kind of came from your hometown. And I said, "Sure, I'll take him on." He was a bit of a handful, just a crazy nut. He's come a long way though, so I'm pretty proud of Ghost. We will do a demo later on. I'll have a volunteer sit in the chair down on that side, and then I'll run him around, and then hopefully Ghost will detect some drugs on that person. And then
Those aren't my pants.
I need to go.
And then I have another stash up here. This is just marijuana, so I'll do a demonstration after my.
We could take a 5-minute break in case.
You know, the Garuba's gonna empty out. So yeah, so next I'll talk a little bit about the K-9 program itself. Like I said, we look for shelter dogs. We do most of our training down at Shelton. We have a prison down there, WCC. It's kind of like the hub. It's where most of the inmates go right after they get their sentence, and then they're kind of farmed out across the state. And then basically from start to finish, we'll go pick up a dog at the shelter. We'll do a little bit of testing at the shelter, see if it's the right dog. Not all dogs can be K-9 dogs. We look for certain breeds, a working breed, terriers, border collies, Malinois, some dogs that have been bred to actually work and do a job. Then you take some of those dogs, and not all of those dogs are going to be good K-9 detection dogs. We look for extreme ball drive. People say, oh, my dog loves the ball. Well, these guys are extreme. They'll pass up food, they'll pass up water, they'll pass up everything for the ball. So, and most of the dogs have one specific ball. It's not, they'll pass every other ball. They just want their ball. So it's a pretty extreme drive that we're looking for. Prey drive is sometimes what we call it. And then we take them down to Shelton. We run them through some tests down there, and then we determine, yes, we want to go further with this, or sometimes we say, oh, this dog won't work out for what we do, and then we have to bring it back. So that's always sad for me. But then from start to finish, it's only about 6 weeks before we get them state certified. And how it works is K-9 officers, new K-9 officers come from all over the region, from Idaho, Montana, from Oregon, and they take our class at DOC. For one thing, it's cheap. It's only $1,500 for the 6 weeks of training, and afterwards you get a dog. The reason we can keep it so cheap is because we get free dogs from the shelter. Whereas a lot of police departments, they look at dogs from a contractor, somebody who that's their business. Sometimes they fly to France or Germany looking for these dogs, and then the price can be $10,000 and up for the dog. So that's how we can keep our price low on training. Then we run 3 academies a year, and I actually help out. In fact, just yesterday, I was helping out teaching down there. I drove down to Shelton and spent the day down there training a new K-9 officer. And then basically after they graduate and get certified, they go back to their facility, whether it's a prison or a drug task force, or if they're just a road cop, and then they start working their dogs. So it's a great program. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the teaching and training. And then on a day-to-day basis, basically what my job looks like is I get my dog, I load him up. My office is at Clallam Bay, but I work all over the state. I work all with different departments. I've worked with Border Patrol, I've worked with DEA, I've worked with FBI, OPNET. So whoever basically calls for assistance or has a need, I'll see if I can help them out. So for example, about a month ago, another handler called me up and asked if I could help assist in Aberdeen, and we did a junior high school. So we were going through kids' backpacks and through the lockers. It was a side note. It was actually Kurt Cobain's junior high school that he went to. It was Miller Junior High down in Aberdeen.
Did you find anything?
Well, how it works a lot of times is when I come by with my dog, I say I have an alert right here, and somebody else looks through the backpack or the locker or whatever. So I'm already away, sometimes even away from the facility before I know if they found, and then they don't often tell me, but my dog did hit on 3 backpacks that day. And that's another thing. So my dog doesn't find drugs. It finds the odor of drugs. So that means that the kid could be coming home from maybe at home, the parents smoke the marijuana, so that's gonna absorb in the backpack. So maybe the kid is clean as can be. Or he had drugs in there the day before and smoked them up or gave them to his friends, and now they're not there, but the odor is still there. So that can work for us, and sometimes that works against us. So like if I'm searching a prison cell and my dog alerts and I look around for the drugs, can't find the drugs, I'll oftentimes just recommend a UA, urinary analysis. And but so my dog doesn't actually find drugs, finds the odor of drugs. Let's see. Excuse me.
Is it only marijuana?
No. Ghost is probably trained on 12 different odors. So basically anything you would find in a prison setting, Ghost has been trained on. So the last thing I trained him on just about 3 weeks ago was fentanyl. You guys have all heard about fentanyl. So my dogs are trained up on fentanyl now. And my dog actually did have a fine just last week, fentanyl fine in Squim. So we did an assist at a drug bust in Squim, and the dog got alerted to a drawer and opened the drawer, and there was a baggie of fentanyl pills. So they're trained on all the main ones. Meth, heroin, Suboxone. It's a prescription drug. It's what the treatment centers are handing out to help with the opioid addiction, but it can also be abused. And then we have this new thing called spice paper that people spray on a sheet of paper, and it comes into our mail system, and then they smoke it inside the prison and get high. It's a synthetic cannabis is what they call it. So I guess that kind of leads me into the next thing I want to talk about, the way drugs get into our prison. One of the ways is, of course, visitation. How that looks like most of the time is a girlfriend comes in, has a balloon of drugs hidden up somewhere, typically up in a cheek well, or sometimes in a bra, on the side of the bra. And when they first get in, they're allowed to kiss, embrace, and kiss their loved one in prison. And so during that kiss, of course, she can transfer the drugs into the inmate's mouth. It's a balloon, he swallows it, he goes back to his cell. Sometimes he's trained, he can train himself to regurgitate and spit up the drugs, or he just waits a couple of days and it comes out eventually. So if it's in the side of the bra, they're playing games like checkers or whatever in the visit room, and she pulls it from the side of her bra, makes a move like this, and as she's making the move, drops it into the cup of water. Then the inmate drinks it and swallows it, and then he just waits for it to come out. So there's several ways they do it in the visit room. One other common way is the girlfriend hides it in somewhere in the visit room or in the bathroom, and then the next day the inmate porter comes and cleans it up. Then he hides it on or in himself. I'm sorry if you're still eating.
Doing very well.
So then he goes back to his cell and treats it and then gives it to whoever ordered it. So a lot of times they don't use it themselves. It's a money making thing. So a sheet of spice paper could go for $1,000 in a prison. One square of Suboxone, if you guys have seen it, the way I describe Suboxone is, you know, those Listerine breath tabs that they're kind of blue and wafer thin. You put them on your mouth and they dissolve. That's exactly what Suboxone looks like, but it's orange and has a little bit of an identifier on it that says. So those girlfriend to go to the treatment center, get them for free. And then get them to her inmate or loved one in prison, and they can go for as much as $500 for a tiny strip like this of Suboxone. So inmates love their drugs. So that's a big problem. One of the reasons we don't like drugs in the prison is it creates violence. So, for example, you said you were going to give me $500 for this strip of Suboxone. No, I only said $300. Now there's an issue, and then there's typically a fight that ensues. Also, another reason we don't like drugs in prison, especially meth, they get all amped up, and they need something to do with that energy, and so they could fight other inmates, which is a problem, or staff. So then we get staff injuries. So it's tough dealing with an inmate when they're sober, but imagine when they're high or drunk. So it just increases the chances of injuries to our staff. Another way drugs get in is through the mail system. I had talked about the spice paper. So they spritz their spice drug on the paper, or you can buy the paper off the internet that's already infused with spice. Then they write their love letter on it, or daddy will miss you, with some markers and crayons, and then they send it in, and then the inmate gets it, and then he basically cuts it up, and all you need is a tiny square, 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. Then they roll it up into a joint and then smoke it. Usually the filler in the joint is tea. So they get tea off the store, and then they put a little rolled up piece of paper, smoke the tea, and the little square of paper, and then they get hot. So another thing they do is they send in the Suboxone. It is so tiny and wafer thin. They first started hiding it under stamps. Then we start cutting out the stamps, and then they start hiding it in the seams of envelopes. So they steam up the envelopes, they hide it in the seams, and then press that glue back together so it's in the glue strip. Every time we do something to prevent them from bringing in that drug, they try something else, a different method. So now it's with Suboxone. Now it's, the Suboxone's water soluble, so they make a little water paste with it, and then they paint on the card itself. So it's orange in color. So you look for an orange colored greeting card, and then you rub the Suboxone on the card. So they're very ingenious. But anyways, those are some of the things we're dealing with. Another way drugs get into our prison, which is the worst way in my opinion, is dirty staff. We had it made the newspapers. It was probably about 2 years ago, but we had a big bust on a dirty staff member, and we had OPNET helping out with that. So we really appreciate that. So the thing with staff is they can bring in large quantities and multiple trips. So we do have a public access where there is some screening, but if an officer wanted to bring in drugs, it would be very easy for them. They could wrap it up in their burrito at home, or hide it in a sandwich. There's several ways, hide it on their body, and then that officer can take it right to the inmate. He has free range just to hand it over to the inmate. And typically how that works is inmates got plenty of time, years and years and years. So they start working at a officer, they pick out an officer they think they can compromise. And it might start off with something small like, you got a strawberry? Are you gonna eat that, man? I haven't had a strawberry in 5 years. That looks so good. An officer should say, get lost, or I'll do paperwork or something like that. If he doesn't, then that's kind of the end. Even if he doesn't confront it, no, it's mine, then inmate knows he can keep working this guy. And then before long, the officer might be bringing in some tobacco for him, or pornography or something like that. And then he's on the hook. So once he brings in something, he's on the hook, and the inmate knows it, and then he just keeps working in and working in like a puppet. So basically, that's the three ways drugs get into our prison. So visitation, mailroom, and dirty sack. Prison setting, I mean, like OCC, the camp, they call it out there past Forks. They have other ways drugs can get in. So they have work crews that go out, DNR crews, they go out into the woods and cut down trees. How am I doing on time? Is anybody watching?
Oh, 20, you got 21 minutes.
Okay,
Plenty
perfect.
of time.
perfect. Okay, so DNR crews go out into the woods and they cut down trees. We also have work crews that come out to our facility. They clean public parks, so they can pick up a drop. So the girlfriend hides some drugs underneath a park bench at the community center. And every Thursday, the inmates know this. They go to the community center and they clean up the grounds. Well, then the inmate told his girlfriend to leave the drugs under the bench, and he finds the drugs and then hides them on his person and then takes them back to the prison. That happens a lot. Sometimes we get lucky and we get some intel by listening to phone calls, or we also have sometimes a snitch kite, which means another inmate, sometimes another competitor, drug competitor, will give information that, hey, this guy's supposed to be picking up drugs Thursday at such and such location. Then we'll either go there prior, definitely we'll go there prior, pick up the drugs. Sometimes we put phony drugs there to see if the inmate will pick them up, and then we can bust them. Another way at camps, and even at some of our other facilities, is just drugs thrown over the fence. So they'll make a slice in a tennis ball, open that tennis ball, fill it with drugs, and then put it in one of those chuckets and chuck it over the fence. Then, you know, if it's in the yard, maybe a new officer looks at the tennis ball and goes, okay, yeah, they get tennis balls. They play with tennis balls, so it's no big deal. Won't even look at it. Seasoned officer will go over there and at least kick it to see if there's any slits or if it looks funny. And so that's another way drugs have been getting into our facilities across the state. Another way that I've heard a lot about, but I don't think it's happened in this state yet, is a drone drop. So you get a drone, fly your drone over the prison yard and drop the drugs in. I have not seen that yet in Washington State. Do we have any questions yet? Yes.
I think it's awesome that you make use of dogs. And my question was, what are the challenges in training a dog that is deaf?
Well, it takes a ton of patience. Training any dog takes a lot of patience, but training a deaf dog takes even more patience. That dog, I have trained dogs for myself and others, but that dog, the initial training I didn't do myself, but I do the maintenance training with it. And he knows his job, and so basically, it doesn't take much patience for me to train this dog, but the initial training, I'm sure, took a little. Yes, but he knows, like I said, he knows his job. I barely have to do anything. If I want him to start working, all I have to do is make some presentations, and he knows his job. But if I was to walk into this room and not make any presentations, just walk by, let's say Ed, and Ed has drugs on him, then the dog's gonna let me know. So he doesn't really have to be turned on per se. He'll let me know if he smells drugs.
Do you think his ability to smell has been enhanced by?
We sure hope so, but I've got a couple of other dogs that I work also, and I don't see anything that makes me think that his ability is stronger than the other dogs. So, although he did find a few months ago, I was asked to stop by one of our prisons in Shelton, and there was 50 boxes of inmate property. So these are cardboard boxes this big, 50 boxes. and they asked if I could run the dog through, because there's supposed to be Suboxone in one of the boxes. So, I ran the dog through, and we had already worked that day. It was a long work day. I had already been to another prison and the dog was tired. But we walked through the boxes. He alerted on one box, and the investigator said, "That's the intel we had. That's the inmate that was supposed to have it." We opened it up, and there was a very tiny little piece of Suboxone. It wasn't even a full strip, and it was hidden in one of the books. Well, I don't know if he actually was smelling that tiny piece of Suboxone, or maybe there is more Suboxone there beforehand, and now it went out to other prisoners. But the fact of the matter is that he could alert to just a book, a piece of Suboxone in a book, in a cardboard box was pretty impressive.
Which is more difficult, training the dog or the individual handler?
That is a great. That's a very good question. And it usually goes pretty fast with the dog. That they'll be telling us where the drugs are in the very first night. So if you have a green handler and a green dog, just brand new, the dog's gonna pick it up so much faster. So it's usually, if you're in a 6-week period, which our academies are, you'll see the dog picking it up really fast. Within 2 weeks, he's very good at what he does. It's after the 3rd or 4th week that the human starts picking it up. And by the 5th week, they're working together as a team. So as a handler, you're basically, you're always watching your dog, but you're looking where your dog has not sniffed. So if I'm coming through here and my dog's typically, naturally, the dog just keeps his head at head level. So depending on where your dog is, just working basically the seats of the booths, they coming along. It's my job to make presentations up here or down low if the dog's not doing that on the cell. So, for example, if there's drugs underneath so my dog's just going to come around and not even sniff the bell. So it's my job to present up onto the bell, and then he'll come up and sniff the bell. Also, I'm looking for any kind of change of behavior, which means anything that the dog is doing that's out of the ordinary. He's coming in, he's doing his regular thing, just sniffing. But then if he does a head snap, that's what we call it, then I know to go back to that area or look at that area. So I'll probably swing him around where he did the head snap, and if he sniffs and then sits this time, then the odor of drugs was there.
K-9 handling is not for free. And it's a difficult job. I can tell you there's six handlers roughly in the state
Yeah, 5.
for the Department of Corrections, and you guys get a treat because I think that's the best.
Oh, well, thank you.
So he did good.
So it's not a career you aspire to from a young age, it's something you kind of fall into?
Yeah, well, the way it works at my prison, and it's not the best system, is it's on a bid system. So whoever has the most seniority will get the position when it becomes available. So for example, if I win the lotto tonight and retire, then whoever has a interest in the position with the most seniority. It's not, in most other positions at the prison, it's just fine, but not really for the K-9 officer, because they have to be somewhat physically agile. They have to be somewhat slim because you're working in tight quarters with a dog, sometimes 100-pound Malinois. So you guys have to work together in tight areas. A big one is motivation, because nobody really watches me. If I wanted, I could sit in my office all day and nobody's going to say, hey, I never see Prange walking around with his dog. So I have very little supervision. Ed trusts me to to do my job. And so I don't want to take advantage of that. And then the other thing is, okay, so the physical ability and you have to be self-motivated for sure, self-motivated to find drugs. So you have to know where to look, listen to phone calls, work off of intel from our investigators. They can listen to phone conversation, and then they can tell me to go to such and such cell or watch this guy for his mail to come in. So let's see. All right, so let's talk a little bit. How am I doing on time? 10 minutes. Okay. For the total.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into the demonstration. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we can move this. If somebody wants to move that for me, place it on the table. And I'm going to bring a chair down on this side of the table. So we're going to pretend that Ed is a visitor. So we suspect Ed of bringing in drugs, and then I'm going to walk my dog around Ed, and then hopefully my dog will alert on Ed. So you can see what the alert looks like is sniff, 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 and then sit. And then my dog looks at me for his reward, which is the ball. The dog works for the ball. Then after, we'll have a little bit of playtime here. I'll tug with the dog. That's what he loves, tugging. I'll get the ball back, and then we'll do a little search along the table, and then we'll find those drugs over there. As a handler, I have to think about the airflow of the room. A lot of times right next to a door is tricky for a dog because you have air either coming into the room or leaving the room. So we'll see how he does. And odor drops. So you'll probably see him sniffing up that wall to the training aid. So we'll see how that goes. Ed, I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Yeah, with those.
I'll give him a heads up on where it's at.
Okay.
So I can talk a little bit in the next 5 minutes. So, K-9 handling, I handled 2 dogs myself. I was ready to retire from the K-9 world once I was done. It's extremely challenging. Every time you get a new dog, basically, you're gonna report to McNeil Island. Does everybody know where McNeil Island is? And you're gonna live there for 6 weeks. It's a challenging time. You know, you're living at a prison for 6 weeks. Most of the competent dogs that are trained here in the state are trained by DOC at McNeil Island to the highest standard. And when we talk about standards, there's a Washington State Police K-9 Association and the Criminal Justice Training Commission that come up with a standard. They take master instructors from across the state. They watch the K-9 team. They hide the training aids, and you have to have 100% fines on all those training aids in order to advance. So that's a very, very difficult task. When we talked about where the errors occur, the errors never occur with the dog. The errors always occur with the handler. And so going through my initial first 6 weeks, and that was in 1998. It's the first time I actually visited McNeil Island with my new dog, Triton. Triton was a 100-pound black lab. So he was big at me at that time. I must have been about 16. He was 100 pounds. And he basically ruled the roost. He would push me around. He would tell me where to go and what to do. And my instructor at the time, her name was Barb Davenport, and she's out there like, trust your dog, trust your dog. You know, don't restrain your dog right now. He's telling you something. He's telling you something. It's just 6 weeks of that interaction with your dog before it's like, okay, yeah, now I'm to the point where I can trust my dog. Because the errors occur with the handler. So it takes a lot of patience, and we've worked tirelessly with Eric, and Eric is truly one of the best in the state, one of the best handlers. Far better achieved than I ever was as a handler. Different environments, outside of the prison versus within the prison. As a K-9 handler out on the streets, you're doing schools, you're stopping cars, you're searching cars, you're in houses. where there's so many different distractions. So the houses that we're searching out on the street, there's so many different distractions for the dog. It's food, other animals, all those other things that really will take a dog. And so we have to, in these settings, we're always training, we're putting food out, your dog food scattered everywhere. You have your dog work past all those different distractions with the singular focus of actually finding the prize. So all those odors they're trying to decipher, and that's where it takes constant maintenance with your dog, is weekly you're training, you're putting out these training aids just like this, and at the end of the day, Eric's gonna say, hey, we're doing training, I'm gonna evaluate my dog to make sure that he's all this food, everything else, he's not distracted by all those other things. And it looks like Ghost just arrived.
Yeah. So typically in visit room, I walk the dog by visitors. It's not a directed search. So I'm just trying to see if I can pick up any kind of odor. But we suspect Ed, so I'll do a walk around first, see if the dog is interested. And then if the dog doesn't pick up anything, then I'll do a more directed search with a presentation, just basically showing where I want the dog to put his nose.
Watch the dog, not Eric.
So already. That was quick and easy. But typically I would walk the dog around the visitor. So next, after I get the ball back, I'll walk along these booths. No presentations. I'll walk him back into that corner, see if he can pick it up on his own. If not, I'll give a couple of presentations.
If any of you are gonna need a lawyer after Eric.
Sometimes it's a trick getting the ball back from him. Good boy.
The boy goes.
Of course, he
He
can't
can
hear
hear
me.
you.
Can't hear me when but this is good boy. This is good boy. That's called a change of behavior. He's just sniffing around doing his job. He didn't pick up on the odor because maybe there's not enough of it. That's a change of behavior going up the flag there. He's checking out everything.
Yeah. He's excited.
Yeah. I can use my body to kind of, it's called squaring off the corner. Basically, I stand like this and I want him to work this area and find it on his own. And then if not, then I'll make some presentations. Found it. And then I make some presentations over here so he doesn't think every time I stop, that means. Okay, and then this is where to go. And then he shows me who sits. And gets his ball.
The true art of the K-9 handling is recognizing that change of behavior. So right here, the dog knew that there were fronts in the room. It's just like, now it's his job, and that's where the handlers make mistakes. It's not recognizing the change of behavior, trusting your dog, and then pulling your dog past where that change of behavior was. Because now the dog wants to work to the source of the drug, and what happens with inexperienced handlers is they pull the dog off the source of the odor.
And you can see why Eric would take an alert and keep on moving, just identify it and have somebody else search it, because, you know, a change of behavior here would be something we want to come in and search, because it might be there, but it's hidden or it's kind of tucked away somewhere versus spending all this time trying to search it. So a lot of the times with us, we'll work together. We'll do a lot of the searching once the, and then give the alert response or give a change of behavior to an area, and you couldn't identify where it's necessarily at. It's definitely a team effort.
And the other strategy, you see how much energy he's expending right now. He'll get tired very quickly. And as soon as his mouth starts to open and he starts to search, you know he's starting to get tired. You want the mouth to be closed. and breathing through his nose in order to make sure he's being accurate to do that. So it takes, that's why Eric has so many dogs too, because he can search this room, start to see the ghost jaw drop and go like, okay, second here, he's not smelling as good efficiently.
Right.
And so you want to be as efficient as possible before he gets tired, pull in another dog and continue to do your searching. So there's all the cues that a good handler needs to look for.
Can I ask what happened? Do you guys get to keep the dogs? Like you were talking about Triton, if you win the lottery, do you get to take ghosts with you?
More than likely, who else is gonna want him?
So I had Nitro and I had Triton. Triton was ended up being sold to another agency when I acquired Nitro, which was my second dog. And then Nitro lived with me until he passed.
Nice.
So I was able to keep Nitro until he passed. Triton was too valuable. And so as soon as I was transitioning, he had a lot of credentialing behind him, had a lot of fines, and so you can celebrate that. So State Patrol ended up going in and buying, that was tough. For your first dog that you lived with, and he's, he's a tool that's being sold to another agency for just like,
The Department of
my
Corrections,
best friend.
the Department of Corrections, pretty much the dogs live and stay with the handler. They have a work span, kind of like they retire at certain points in their life. Eric has one of the dogs who's retired from service that he and his family have. Blue, she was great. But it's hard, I mean, unless if they still have that work, they're in that middle of, say, their work life, and they want to work. And so sometimes they'll look for, like in Ghost's case, another handler. But for the most part, they pretty much live and stay with until the end of life. So,
But they are terrible pets. You just have that bond with them. They know nothing more like Nitro or Triton coming to our house. All they want to do is work. Just so they knock everything over. They're just like, Daddy, this is what I'm supposed to do. I want my ball. So they knock over everything in your house, and including your kiddos. And so it's like, I mean, and they're confined typically, all my dogs were confined to a kennel. And it seemed like such a cruel life having this dog in the backyard. All he wanted to do though, he'd save up, they save up their energy, leave that kennel to go to work. So playtime is going to work for them. So so you end up going to work a lot. Just to get down here.
Deputy Sheriff Brian and Eric, fantastic presentation. Thank you, Pete. I really enjoyed it. We really appreciate your all service. Obviously, top professionals here, including Ghost.
Thank you.
So Ghost, you want to pick so we have a tradition that you just pick one of the tickets and you can see who $10 and chance at the lottery. Just read the last four.
5496. 5496.
Oh, so who came in
That'd be me.
All right.
And I kind of days space.